Hollywood has always been a magnet for rumors, some glamorous, some bizarre, and some dipped in just enough mystery to make you wonder if the studio lot was built on ancient ley lines. But when it comes to old Hollywood, the gossip didn't just sparkle. It glowed with the same eerie shimmer you'd expect from a seance held in a candlelit mansion above Sunset Boulevard. Tonight, we're talking about that kind of glow, the myths, whispers, and tall tales suggesting certain stars had more than talent up their sleeves, maybe a little magic, too. Whether it was strange rituals, mysterious habits, or just the kind of charisma people couldn't explain, these celebrities turned regular rumors into supernatural legends. So grab your popcorn and maybe a protective amulet just in case. Number 15. Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo's legend has always lived in a strange space between reality and myth. She was the woman who wanted to be alone, and the public took that solitude and spun it into something almost mystical. The rumors claim she practiced strange rituals, meditative enchantments, or energy work decades before those concepts had names. In truth, Garbo was simply private, so private that Hollywood, which thrives on spectacle, filled the gaps with imagination. People said her silence wasn't just silence, but a ritual. Her calm wasn't calm, it was a spell. Her ability to walk into a room and command attention without speaking turned into whispers. That she possessed some kind of hypnotic power. The legend took root because she embodied a kind of ethereal presence that felt supernatural in an era dominated by loud personalities and even louder publicity machines. Garbo, unlike many stars, didn't play the celebrity game. She didn't do interviews, didn't cater to fan magazines, didn't attend parties unless absolutely necessary. This absence made her mythical, and from that myth came exaggerated stories that she meditated for hours while surrounded by incense, or that she had a collection of esoteric writings so powerful they brought enlightenment or madness. These rumors had no basis in reality, but thrived because people desperately wanted an explanation for her magnetic presence. Hollywood needed to justify why she felt more like a celestial being than a mortal actress. So it said, magic, and the audience believed it not because Garbo ever said a word about it, but because she said almost nothing at all. Sometimes silence is the most powerful spell of all. Number 14. Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi is a perfect example of a man whose on-screen shadow swallowed the real person entirely. Once he became Dracula, the public seemed convinced that the role wasn't just a performance, it was a lifestyle. The rumors of magic, occult rituals, and eerie midnight habits surged instantly. The simple truth: Lugosi had a flair for dramatic presentation and a love for theatrical props. But in rumor-heavy old Hollywood, that was more than enough ammunition. People spread stories claiming he performed rituals involving ancient texts, or that he carried objects imbued with dark power. What he actually carried were props he liked and mementos from films. But try telling that to a studio system that thrived on sensationalism. The public saw the cape, the stare, the gothic voice, and assumed no man could act like that unless he had first-hand supernatural experience. Lugosi's Eastern European origins didn't help. At a time when xenophobia ran rampant, his accent and mysterious demeanor became fuel for exaggerated tales. Hollywood reporters describe him with phrases like unnervingly hypnotic, which tabloids twisted into Lugosi uses hypnotic magic. Soon, the rumors became so widespread that some fans feared him, while others adored him for what they imagined he represented, a portal into the darker sciences. What really kept the legend alive, though, was Lugosi's absolute commitment to his roles. He performed them with such conviction that audiences forgot they were watching fiction. It wasn't that Lugosi did magic, it was that he was magic on screen, and people assumed that must spill into real life. In the end, the rumors followed him forever, transforming an actor into a mythic figure of cinematic occultism. The man was an artist. The legend made him a sorcerer. Number 13. Marlene Dietrich. Marlene Dietrich was an enchantress long before anyone whispered about magic. Her mystique wasn't built from rituals or talismans, but from meticulous attention to image and atmosphere. Yet that very mastery of presence made the public convinced she wielded supernatural forces. Dietrich didn't simply enter a room, she materialized. She didn't pose for lighting, she commanded it like an elementalist, controlling beams of pure radiance. People who worked with her swore she looked illuminated from within, which quickly evolved into myths claiming she used glamour magic, an old folkloric idea describing the power to captivate through illusion. Dietrich thrived on control. She engineered every detail of her look, the tilt of her chin, the shadow across her cheek, the shimmer of her costume. In an era when actresses were often reduced to studio puppets, her autonomy felt radical, so radical that observers didn't have the language for it. Thus, they used mystical terms. They said she cast enchantments on photographers, that she could manipulate mood with a glance, that her charisma was so intense it had to be supernatural. But her magic was technical, artistic, intentional, not mystical. Nonetheless, the rumors persisted because they fit her image perfectly. Dietrich loved ambiguity. She embraced the mysterious, the gender-bending, the avant-garde. Her androgynous energy, smoky voice, and unshakable self-possession led gossip columnists to claim she drew power from unseen sources. They didn't understand that a woman fully in control of her identity was power enough. But old Hollywood loved drama, and so the myths flourished. Dietrich became not just an actress, but an otherworldly presence, elevated beyond humanity. Whether she practiced magic or not, she certainly mastered the illusion of it. Number 12. Orson Welles. Orson Welles didn't need rumors to feel larger than life. He already was. With that booming Shakespearean voice, commanding presence, and flair for spectacle, he seemed like someone who toyed with reality rather than lived within it. Welles's actual love for stage magic began as a childhood hobby, yet Hollywood being Hollywood, the idea of him performing simple card tricks grew into elaborate tales of occult fascination. According to gossip, he didn't just practice illusions, he summoned forces. Witnesses of his parlor magic performances described him as too good, which in the minds of the impressionable public translated to supernatural talent. Once Citizen Kane dropped, the myth-writing skyrocketed. Critics joke he must have sold his soul to create such a masterpiece at such a young age. Satire, naturally, was interpreted literally. Welles rarely corrected these rumors. Why would he? A magician never reveals his secrets, and Welles loved a dramatic mystique. His interest in esoteric philosophy, history, and theatrical trickery created a perfect storm for speculation. People whispered that he studied forbidden texts, that he could predict outcomes, or that he had a sixth sense for drama. In reality, he simply had incredible instincts as a storyteller. Welles's persona fed the myth further. He moved like a man conducting invisible orchestras, spoke as if narrating cosmic truths, and presented ideas with such confidence that people assumed he had access to hidden knowledge. Hollywood legend transformed him from a director into an alchemist of cinema, someone who transformed ordinary film stock into gold. And while Welles never practiced magic in the literal sense, the way he shaped stories, manipulated perception, and disrupted conventions certainly felt magical to the world watching him. Number 11. Mae West. Mae West was a force of nature, bold, witty, and undeniably magnetic. And in old Hollywood, any woman with that much confidence automatically became the subject of mystical rumors. People didn't know how to categorize her. She was too clever, too in control, too daring for the era's sensibilities. And when society can't understand a woman's power, it often jumps straight to superstition. Whispers began circulating that West relied on charms, spiritual books, or rituals of seduction. In truth, she was simply brilliant at performance and self-branding. But to the public, she seemed to possess the ability to bend situations to her will, an ability that, in a more fearful time, was labeled magic. West had a habit of reading about philosophy, mind power theories, and early forms of self-help. None of it was occult, but the vocabulary was dramatic enough that tabloids twisted it into mystical practice. They imagined her reciting spells between takes, or using whispered affirmations to conjure success. Her humor, so sharp it felt weaponized, added to the legend. People said she cast verbal spells, that her one-liners could enchant or disarm anyone. What they didn't realize was that West wrote most of her own material unheard of for actresses then. And her wit was the product of genuine craftsmanship, not sorcery. Rumors also claim she carried symbolic objects for empowerment again. Untrue, but the idea clung to her sparkling persona. She became a caricature in the public imagination, the temptress with mystical power. the seductress whose charm transcended logic. In the end, the magic wasn't in rituals, it was in her audacity, her comedic timing, and her refusal to conform. West wasn't casting spells. She was breaking boundaries, and old Hollywood didn't know the difference. Number 10. Vincent Price. Vincent Price became the unofficial patron saint of horror, long before he knew what hit him. With his velvet voice, aristocratic demeanor, and endless parade of macabre film roles, it was inevitable that rumors would swirl around him. People didn't just believe he played spooky characters, they believed he lived a spooky life. Whispers claimed he practiced ritual magic, studied ancient texts, or communed with supernatural forces to perfect his performances. The truth: Price was a warm, gentle, intellectual man with a taste for culture, but his on-screen persona was so perfectly eerie that audiences blurred the line between actor and character. Price loved folklore, poetry, storytelling, and theatrical performance. Occasionally, he performed stage magic for fun, which Hollywood promptly exaggerated into occult expertise. Fans projected onto him a gothic mystique that wasn't really there. When he narrated ghost stories or introduced horror shows, his delivery was so mesmerizing that listeners assumed he wasn't just reading but channeling. Journalists, eager for sensational copy, painted him as a man who lived among shadows and arcane symbols. Even though he repeatedly stated he was simply an entertainer, the myth had already grown legs. Audiences imagined him living in a mansion filled with secret chambers and ritual candles. In reality, he was more likely to be found hosting a dinner party or discussing art history. But myths thrive when they match an archetype, and Price embodied the master of the macabre so convincingly that the public never let him be anything else. The magic they attributed to him wasn't literal, it was the kind of magic that happens when an actor becomes synonymous with the supernatural. Price didn't practice witchcraft. He practiced showmanship so well that people refused to believe it was showmanship at all. Number 9. Gloria Swanson. Gloria Swanson represented excess, glamour, and reinvention, the perfect recipe for mystical rumors in an era obsessed with the exotic. Long before wellness trends filled Instagram feeds, Swanson explored meditation, dietary experimentation, holistic philosophies, and European health practices. Harmless, completely. But in the 1920s and 30s, anything outside the steak and cigarette lifestyle was considered suspiciously mystical. The press blew her wellness habits into tales of enchanted routines, secret rituals, and starlit magic. According to the tabloids, Swanson's beauty and stamina weren't the results of discipline. They were the effects of arcane practices. People said she followed esoteric schedules, aligned her energy with planetary cycles, or used vibrational techniques to maintain her youth. These were gross exaggerations of her genuine interest in self-improvement and alternative health. But the rumors stuck because they suited her persona. Swanson had an aura of control and sophistication that felt uncommon in Hollywood's chaos. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew herself deeply, which made outsiders wonder if she possessed wisdom beyond ordinary understanding. As her fame grew, so did the myth. Audiences speculated that her ability to reinvent herself, transitioning from silent films to talkies with remarkable poise, was evidence of hidden practices. They believed she used mental magic to manifest new phases of her career. The legend became so strong that interviews describing her calmness were misinterpreted as descriptions of trance-like states. In truth, Swanson simply understood the value of introspection in a business that demanded constant reinventing. But Hollywood always prefers dramatic explanations over logical ones. The myth of her magic became part of her identity, blurring the line between mindful living and mystical allure. Number 8. Rudolph Valentino. Rudolph Valentino was one of the first male sex symbols in film history, so of course the public assumed he had supernatural charm. Women fainted at his premieres, fan mail poured in like devotional offerings, and his screen presence felt almost otherworldly. Hollywood audiences couldn't understand how one man could project such sensual magnetism, so they created explanations involving mysticism. Valentino wasn't a magician, but his charisma convinced people he possessed some sort of spiritual or energetic power. His interest in astrology only fueled the rumors. as did his relationship with people who participated in alternative spiritual movements of the time. Soon, the gossip pages were filled with claims that he engaged in occult practices, performed meditative rituals, or studied esoteric philosophies. The legend intensified after his death. Mediums claimed they could communicate with his spirit. Seances were held by grieving fans, and tabloids capitalized on this frenzy by suggesting Valentino had been connected to supernatural forces even in life. Rumors sprouted saying he carried symbolic objects, followed prophetic dreams, or had a cosmic connection that shaped his destiny. None of this had factual grounding, but emotional hysteria made people eager to believe anything that kept his memory alive. Because he represented an ideal of passion and mystery, Valentino became the perfect canvas for supernatural folklore. His early death at 31 sealed the myth permanently. Every star who dies young becomes the subject of magical speculation. People said his allure was too intense for the mortal world, that he burned too brightly to last, that he had been touched by something beyond. In reality, his power came from acting skill, cultural fascination, and studio publicity machines. But the legend of Valentino, the enchanted lover, was far more compelling. Number 7. Theta Bara. If Hollywood has ever deliberately manufactured a magical figure, it was Theta Bara. The studios didn't just let rumors spread, they engineered them. Bara was marketed as an exotic, mystical, dangerous enchantress from Egypt, versed in ancient rites and forbidden arts. None of it was true. She was actually Theodosia Goodman from Cincinnati. But Fox Studios believed audiences would flock to someone who seemed otherworldly, so they built an entire mythos around her. Publicity images showed her posing with occult symbols, serpents, and shadowy backdrops that screamed supernatural. Newspapers were fed elaborate backstories portraying her as a woman raised in mystical traditions. The public, starved for spectacle, eagerly consumed this fantasy. Bara herself became trapped in the persona, known widely as the vamp, a term that implied magical seduction. When audiences saw her on screen, they believed they were witnessing a real sorceress, not an actress performing scripted melodrama. They assumed her power came from ancient secrets rather than from marketing genius and strong screen presence. The legend grew so strong that even after her career waned, the mystique overshadowed the woman behind it. The irony is that Bara's supposed magic was pure publicity alchemy. Studios discovered that mystery sells, and they doubled down on it. They fed stories about rituals, incantations, and spiritual training, knowing fans would latch on. And they did. Theta Bara became the embodiment of occult femininity, not because she practiced magic, but because Hollywood conjured that image out of thin air. In a way, that transformation was magic in itself, proof that storytelling can reshape a life. Today, Bara remains a symbol of how an actress can become mythic simply by stepping into the right spotlight and letting the rumors do the rest. Number 6. Lon Chaney. Sr. Lon Chaney Sr., the man of 1,000 faces, built his legend on transformation. His makeup work was so advanced, so shocking for the time, that audiences genuinely believed he had access to forbidden knowledge. People whispered that his ability to morph into grotesque figures required supernatural aid. How else, they argued, could a single man reshape his body and face so drastically? They didn't understand prosthetics. They understood magic. Chaney kept his methods secret, which only deepened suspicion. The more he refused to explain, the more convinced the public became that his skills transcended the physical. Chaney's characters twisted, tortured, haunting, felt too real for comfort. In an era before behind-the-scenes documentaries, audiences assumed what they saw on screen reflected some deeper truth. Some said he used pain as ritual, embracing physical suffering to summon authenticity. Others claimed he channeled dark emotions or tapped into psychological realms most people never dared approach. These interpretations came from fear as much as admiration. Chaney evoked discomfort, wonder, and awe, and people explained that power in the only language they knew, mysticism. The legends also grew because he maintained strict privacy. Chaney rarely gave interviews and avoided the Hollywood spotlight, making him an enigma. The more he hid, the more the world filled the void with speculation. He became not just an actor, but a myth, an alchemist transforming human features into nightmares and beauty with equal mastery. Even today, when makeup artistry is widely understood, looking at his work still feels a little magical. Chaney didn't practice sorcery, but he harnessed transformation so fully that people thought he must. And perhaps that's the ultimate testament to his artistry. Audiences couldn't accept that a mere man could do what he did. Number 5. Jean Harlow. Jean Harlow, the original platinum blonde, became the subject of magical rumors not because she practiced anything mystical, but because her life unfolded with such intensity and tragedy that superstition filled every gap. Her ethereal beauty seemed almost unreal, which led audiences to whisper about supernatural origins. Her hair so white it glowed was unlike anything people had seen. They called it moonlight hair, said she had an aura, and speculated that she possessed a kind of magnetic force. Studio lighting made her shimmer in a way that cameras could barely capture, and soon, the public insisted she had a mystical glow. Harlow's life was punctuated by coincidences, illnesses, accidents, tabloid scandals that people interpreted as either fate or curse. Every misfortune around her became fuel for stories that she had been touched by supernatural forces. Some claimed she carried emotional energy that impacted those around her. Others said she had unknowingly been given powers because of her rising fame. None of these stories had any basis in reality, but they reflected a public eager to explain why Harlow felt different, because she often portrayed characters who seemed untouchable or tragically fated. Audiences blurred the line between the actress and her roles. They saw her as a figure destined for a mythical arc, and Hollywood myth-making took over from there. When she died young, the legend cemented instantly. People claimed her light was too bright, too powerful, too unnatural for the mortal world. The mythology surrounding her became a narrative of magic lost too soon. In truth, Harlow wasn't magical. She was misunderstood, mesmerizing, and magnified by a culture that didn't know how to appreciate complexity without resorting to the supernatural. But her legend persists because she still feels like a dream Hollywood once conjured. #4. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn lived so wildly that any rumor about him sounded plausible. He was Hollywood's swashbuckling rogue, part adventurer, part troublemaker, part myth. People whispered he brought home strange artifacts from his travels, participated in esoteric ceremonies, or associated with mystics he met abroad. The truth was more mundane. Flynn loved adventure, culture, and collecting interesting objects. But in a gossip-hungry industry, collector of curios quickly morphed into keeper of magical relics. Flynn's charisma fueled the rumors further. He seemed to glide through life with improbable luck, barely avoiding scandals, landing roles effortlessly, charming his way out of chaos. Observers interpreted this as evidence of supernatural protection or influence. They compared him to trickster figures from folklore, men blessed by fortune or cursed by it depending on the day. His unpredictable lifestyle made him a canvas for speculation. Newspapers dramatized his nightlife, describing his parties as ritualistic, simply because they were strange compared to Hollywood norms. His travels through jungles, deserts, and remote islands inspired stories that he learned ancient secrets or absorbed mystical practices. He just had an expensive hobby for exploration. But the myth persisted because he embodied the fantasy of a man living beyond ordinary boundaries. Flynn himself occasionally played into the rumors for entertainment. He had a mischievous sense of humor and enjoyed leaning into his rogue persona. If someone asked if he knew magic, he might wink rather than deny it. Little gestures like that launched entire tabloid cycles. In the end, Flynn wasn't a sorcerer. He was a chaotic, magnetic figure whose life felt too extravagant to be real. Hollywood explained the impossible with magic because reality wasn't dramatic enough to contain him. Number 3. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth's transformation from Margarita Cancino to Hollywood's ultimate goddess created an aura of metamorphosis that people interpreted as magical. Her reinvention wasn't sorcery, it was grueling grooming, styling, and training. But in the eyes of the public, no mere mortal could change so drastically. She seemed to transform not just her appearance, but her entire energy. Suddenly, she didn't just act like a star, she radiated like one. This almost alchemical shift sparked rumors that she used mystical beauty techniques, glamour spells, or energy rituals to maintain her allure. Hayworth's performances only amplified the myths. She moved as if she had control over light itself, with each gesture choreographed to hypnotize. Audiences were convinced she had a kind of enchanting power that captivated everyone around her. Reports emerged that her presence could shift a room, or that she had an uncanny ability to influence the mood of a scene simply by walking into it. These descriptions, meant metaphorically, were taken literally by eager gossip writers. As her fame grew, people said her beauty was too perfect to be natural. They theorized she possessed ancient secrets of seduction or followed mystical traditions. From her family's dance heritage, none were true, but they made compelling stories. Hayworth, ever graceful, didn't correct the myths. She understood the value of mystique in Hollywood's narrative jungle. Her personal struggles deepened the supernatural narrative. Some speculated she lived under a femme-fatale curse, confusing her emotional pain with mystical symbolism. Hollywood loves to dramatize, and so the myth of magical Rita flourished. The reality was far more human: discipline, artistry, and reinvention. But myths don't grow from truth, they grow from fascination. Hayworth inspired a kind of awe that felt magical, and so people labeled it magic. Number 2. Boris Karloff. Boris Karloff, forever linked to his portrayal of Frankenstein's monster, became another victim of Hollywood's tendency to turn horror icons into real-life myths. Karloff's calm, gentle persona contrasted so dramatically with his monstrous screen image that audiences were convinced he must be hiding some kind of supernatural knowledge. Rumors claimed he studied ancient lore, understood the dark arts, or communed with shadows to bring his roles to life. In truth, Karloff was a thoughtful, soft-spoken professional, but the contrast between his real personality and his on-screen terrors created cognitive dissonance that fueled mystical interpretation. Because Karloff played creatures who seemed to transcend death, audiences projected onto him an aura of otherworldliness. They imagined him as someone with insight into unseen realms. His dedication to his craft, sitting through hours of makeup, performing grueling roles, was seen not as discipline, but as ritualistic preparation. Hollywood loved the idea of a man who suffered for art, and it reinterpreted his professionalism as supernatural endurance. On set, Karloff moved deliberately, almost meditatively. This was simply his temperament, but crew members often described his presence as uncannily calm, a phrase tabloids twisted into eerily otherworldly. Soon, gossip grew that he had an unusual sensitivity to energies, that he brought an atmosphere of mystery wherever he went. None of this had factual grounding, but it captivated the public. The legend intensified when Karloff narrated spooky stories and hosted horror specials. His voice, deep, smooth, haunting, made people believe he was channeling something ancient. Karloff didn't practice magic. He practiced storytelling so skillfully that it felt like magic. His reputation as a horror master turned into folklore, and his mystique became inseparable from the characters who made him famous. In the end, Karloff's only enchantment was his ability to enchant millions. Number 1. Marilyn Monroe. Marilyn Monroe wasn't rumored to practice magic because she acted mysterious or practiced rituals. The legend arose because people couldn't understand her. She radiated something indefinable: fragility wrapped in luminosity, innocence mixed with sensuality. Many stars dazzle, but Monroe glowed. Photographers swore she changed the atmosphere of a room simply by being present. Directors said she appeared rather than walked in. Fans insisted she carried some kind of ethereal power. And because Hollywood can't resist a myth, whispers emerged suggesting she had innate magic, an aura, a spell, an enchantment that made her simultaneously relatable and unreachable. Monroe's charisma wasn't something she consciously wielded. It was something observers couldn't describe without resorting to mystical language. She studied movement, voice, and emotion with intense dedication. She learned how to project vulnerability and desire, how to control her image, how to turn herself on like a switch. Witnesses claimed they saw her transform in real time from unnoticed to transcendent. This transformation became the foundation for supernatural rumors. Her interest in philosophy and self-improvement added fuel. People misinterpreted her readings as spiritual study. Her emotional depth was seen not as complexity, but as mystical sensitivity. Her struggles, meanwhile, created the tragic arc people associate with mythic figures touched by magic, gifted but burdened, brilliant but fragile. Because Monroe represented more than a person, she represented longing, idealism, and impossible beauty. The public needed a supernatural explanation. They said she had moon energy, goddess power, a charm beyond human limits. They didn't understand her humanity, so they made her divine. Monroe didn't practice magic, but she became one of Hollywood's most enduring symbols of it. If magic is the power to captivate across generations, then yes, Monroe had it.